Welcome to It's All Mental, a podcast from Every Turn Mental Health. Mental isn't a bad word. There's no health without mental health. We're here to talk about every high and low, no limits, just good conversation. Hello everybody and welcome to today's episode of It's All Mental. Today's episode is all about the link between nature and mental health, and I'm delighted to be joined by Izzy Knight from the Conservation Volunteers. Outside of my role as Chief Commercial Officer at Every Turn Mental Health, I'm also a trustee and deputy chair of the Conservation Volunteers. So it's fantastic to bring both those worlds together today for this conversation, which I'm sure is going to be really, really interesting. So if we can start by Izzy, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about the Conservation Volunteers, that would be great.
Yeah, hi, I'm Izzy. I'm a project officer at the Conservation Volunteers. My site is in Tottenham Hale. Our main aim as a charity is really connecting people with green spaces. And I suppose, as it says on the name, on the tin, the Conservation Volunteers, our aim is to get people volunteering sort of nature conservation, and getting involved in their local green space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was lucky enough to come along to your site in Tottenham Hale last week, which was really, really lovely to see some of the work and activities that's going on in there to develop that space. So what are some of the activities that people can get involved in with the conservation volunteers and, you know, the kind of volunteering programs that you have on offer?
So at my site, for example, we have one day a week where we kind of do more habitat management type stuff. And that can be anything from scything a wildflower meadow to getting in a pair of waders and getting in our pond and doing some management in there. Or it can be helping us sort of seed some of our new areas. So it's quite varied, particularly depending on the season. And then another day that we do, which I really love, is getting out and about and doing wildlife surveying. So this can vary from doing bird watching with us, which we do every single week, to bumblebees, which is a personal favorite of mine, even moths, so a bit of everything really. And I think that's a really good opportunity to start learning about the nature that's in your area as well. So, you know, it can be whether you don't even know what a robin looks like, or we have some people who turn up and go, ah, yes, I know that call of a Chetty's warbler or something, and I'm there nodding, go, good, I need to learn that later. So I'm constantly learning as well, which is great. And then, you know, different groups, sometimes we have groups that do sort of community food growing up in our site in Meridian Water. We even just have sort of craft days, things like that. So yeah, real variety, lots of choice to get involved in.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. And like you said, I guess it's part of kind of getting out there and into the nature and actually, you know, doing something which is benefiting the local habitat and local community, but also learning something at the same time as well. It was lovely while I was there last week. Obviously, it's just, you know, you're so used to spotting birds and species, and, you know, it feels like that's a really great way to, you know, educate yourself a little bit more, like you said, around what's, you know, on your doorstep, which is lovely.
Oh yeah, for sure. And any sort of opportunity, you know, I might have days where someone's trying to dig in a tree and I'll just turn up with a bumblebee that I found. I'm like, oh, look what this is, or a mushroom or something like that. So yeah, it is a really good opportunity to learn, and I like teaching people. It's yeah, it's really fun.
Fabulous. And do you think there is a link between mental health, taking care of green spaces, spending time in nature, and how that can support good mental health?
100%. I don't think there's any doubt in that. I know there's been a lot of research into it lately, that it reduces stress, it's good for your physical health, really good for loneliness. And I know, particularly after like COVID and things like that, loneliness was something a lot of people suffered with. And yeah, I just think getting outside, looking at something green, listening to a sound that isn't necessarily, you know, sort of cars in the background, Yeah, I think things like that are just so important for people. Also getting in some sunshine as well, getting that vitamin D. You know, I know from personal experience, I feel so much better when I've been in green space. It's good to just take a moment and take a deep breath and just sort of go, and yeah, stop and slow down.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, totally relate to that as well. I think if, you know, whatever your job is, if you get that opportunity to, you know, yeah, take a break, take a breath, just get out and step outside into nature, it can really, you know, help kind of ground you, can't it? And can you talk a little bit about the kind of experiences of some of the volunteers, I guess, and, you know, what you've seen, because you must have seen lots of volunteers who have engaged in the work with TCV over your time, you know, what kind of benefits they've experienced and what you've seen.
One thing I really like, or one group I really like getting, is sometimes we get people doing a volunteer day who normally work in offices and things like that. And I definitely notice them getting outside, and they comment just how different it is as well, and how much enjoyment they get from it, particularly doing something physical. But I also think a big thing again for our volunteers is spending time around other people. You know, I don't want to talk personally about a lot of them, but in general, yeah, I would say a lot of people really do get that benefit from being in the green space, doing something physical. We get such a wide range of people as well. It can vary from students to retirees, people who've just got a bit of time off work. So yeah, a bit of everything really.
Yeah, and that's a really good point actually, in terms of how your work as well as bringing people out into nature, learning about the environment and the local habitat, is also bringing them together as individuals, and I guess connecting together as well, which is, you know, which is really important, isn't it, in terms of being connected into your community.
Yeah, and I think obviously when you came for our day, one of our big things is we always have our tea and biscuit break, which is just a great opportunity to get everyone together, sitting down, chatting. It's just a really nice opportunity to connect people, I think, from sometimes very different walks of life, and learning kind of their experiences. And it's always just such a nice time. And obviously the biscuits are really great. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, here for the biscuits for sure. So, have you got any other examples of the ways that you've seen green space supporting and impacting mental health?
Yeah, so I got on my phone this morning and messaged my sister and said, "Oh, I'm going on a podcast today. Can I talk about your trips to the cemetery?" Which I know sounds really strange, but most mornings my sister will walk through Cambridge Cemetery, which is, it's absolutely stunning. I've been there. She's taken me before, and it's just full of all these amazing trees and blossom, loads of bird song. And she was like, yes, talk about my trips to the cemetery. I love them so much. Yeah, and that's actually something we sometimes do together when we go to different places. It's go visit the cemetery, which I know sounds a bit doom and gloom, but they can be really important green spaces. And yeah, depending which ones you go to, like there's one in Tower Hamlets, which is just, it's so wild, and it's full of loads of wildflowers and bluebells, and it's managed really well. Yeah, my sister just, they seem to bring so much joy to her because of getting in that green space.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's sometimes the areas that you might not think about. I guess, you know, sometimes when we think about green space, we think about getting out, and it's got to be out of the city into the countryside. But there's so many like great green spaces in a lot of cities. And it's, yeah, finding those kind of maybe slightly unusual areas. I completely agree. And particularly in London, some of the cemeteries in London are absolutely, yeah, absolutely beautiful. And I love that bit around bird song, and you know, I love that. It's one of my favorite things about living where we do here, is actually just kind of, yeah, opening up the windows and just hearing bird song. It's really soothing. But well, thank you for your sister for allowing you to share that. That's really lovely, really lovely. And have you got any tips for people who would like to get started in terms of like taking care of green spaces, either in their own garden or, you know, outside and in other areas? Have you got any tips for how people can start to get more involved?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. This is 2 hours later. No, in terms of gardening, there's so many resources online about creating sort of small wildflower meadows. So you can look at the Bumblebee Conservation Trust website for that. You can, if you have the time, you can create a mini pond, and this can be from anything from, sure, you can dig a huge hole in the garden and create a pond, or you can get a fridge drawer container, which we actually have at work, and my colleague turned that into a mini pond. So the thing I like is, no matter how much space you have, big or small, I think you can really help benefit nature. I've got a really small balcony, but I fully intend to turn it into a jungle over time. And then, for example, the conservation volunteers, we're nationwide. On our main website page, there's a postcode finder, so you can find any of our activities that are close to you. You might find that there are friends groups in your area as well that might go off and manage a park on there. They'll have a little group that goes out and do things like that. And then, of course, the many amazing wild charities we have in the UK that I mentioned some before. And then you have things like the Wildlife Trust, the RSPBs, all of these groups will have some form of volunteering. So yes, there's so many opportunities for people to get out and in green space, and hopefully helping nature as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love how it doesn't matter what you've kind of got access to, big or small, there's always ways that you can do those little things. I think I took a photo of that little mini pond while I was at your site last week, because I absolutely love that. It just, quickly, what would that look like? How would you go about? You said, that's just a freezer drawer. You can just have it, a little container. What do you need to do to create that little mini pond?
So as I mentioned before, Frog Life have amazing information on this, but we literally collected some rainwater in it. We left it out for a few days, built up lots of rocks in it too, just to make sure there's lots of different levels. So if anything does get in there that's maybe a bit bigger, then it can get out. We were lucky that we did have a pond on site, so we just collected a few bits of pieces on that. You might need to be a bit careful from collecting from wild ponds, just because it can unfortunately spread disease. So if you can order some sort of plants online and add it to that, you can get floating plants that will oxygenate the water. You can sink some plants in, and then if you're really lucky, some things will come and lay some eggs in there, and you might start finding some wildlife. We've got quite a few snails in there. I would say that our mini pond is 90% snails at the moment, which is great. I really like the water snails.
Fabulous. And yeah, again, it's just a simple thing. I'm sure, people with children, that's a lovely little activity for people to do with their family as well. So yeah, really accessible and fab tips. So thank you. Anything else that you haven't shared, Izzy, that you think it would be worthwhile passing on? I know that people listening would have already found a lot of the stuff that you shared really useful, but is there anything else that you think is important to recognize in terms of that link between nature and mental health?
I mean, from personal experience, I've suffered with depression for quite a good portion of my life, and it is that balance between appreciating what's around you. I feel that sometimes a lot of people really struggle with a sense of purpose, and going and improving a local green space to you and seeing how it changes over time, I think can really help with a sense of purpose. That, and seeing the joy that it can bring to other people, I get a lot from that. When volunteers say how much they enjoy coming, or the fact that we've created such a lovely environment to come and volunteer in, that just means the world to me, because I know that I'm giving back and improving people's lives. So yeah, I think that's another thing as well, that going and helping nature and helping other people will hopefully give you that warm, fuzzy feeling inside that might just help with those bad days.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and sharing, your personal experience for yourself, and also, what you've seen in others. I know that's going to be really valuable for everyone who's listening to this episode. So huge thank you for coming on our It's All Mental podcast. Really appreciate it. And really looking forward to continuing to work with the conservation volunteers and seeing the amazing impact of the work that you're all delivering.
Yeah, come back. We'll get you in the pond next.
Yes. I'm going to get in the waders. That'll be lush. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Izzy.
No worries. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to It's All Mental, a podcast from Every Turn Mental Health. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to follow, rate, and share. See you next time.